Welcome back, members, after the break. So, this is the fourth session for the Income Tax Act 2025, where we had three sessions yesterday. Today is the second day covering Income Tax Act 2025, where in the first session we had the topic on charitable trust. We have another interesting topic coming up, which governs the entire mechanism of the Act in terms of Section 4, Section 5, which cover the scope of total income. Section 6 covers the residency aspects. Section 9 contains the deeming provisions. Apart from these four broad sections, what we are going to cover is the impact of these sections on DTAA as well as the special rates for non-residents. We have today with us CA Ankita Sethia, who will cover these sessions for us. With this, I would like to request Aman Khandelwal to introduce the speaker for the second session for the day.
Thank you, Pradeep Bhai. Ms. Ankita Sethia is currently serving as a member of International Taxation and FEMA Committee of WRC of ICI and working as an associate director at SK Patodia and Associates LLP from more than 6 years. She has completed her graduation from NM College in Mumbai. She has post-qualification experience as a CA of more than 13 years. Her core experience involves FEMA compliance and advisory, that is FEMA Act 1999, International Business Setup Advisory, including structuring of companies, cross-border transactions, helping clients navigate complex regulations in foreign exchange, capital investment, both ODI and FDI, and repatriation of funds. Ms. Ankita focuses on expanding clientele, developing relationships with global partners, networking with professionals, and ensuring clients are compliant with tax and FEMA. She is currently assisting a few MNCs from Spain for their Indian entity incorporation, FDI compliance support, and providing them with virtual CFO services. Her hands-on experience includes facilitating the incorporation of businesses in multiple countries such as India, USA, UK, Singapore, Canada, Europe, Dubai, Middle East, Mauritius, etc. She is a part of various FEMA study circles in Mumbai and actively takes part as a member and speaker with CTC, WRC on various topics such as global opportunities for Indian CAs, FEMA, FDI and ODI regulations and other reporting, ECB filings and compounding under FEMA, setting up LOBOPO in outside India. She has been practicing yoga and meditation from the past 15 years, and very recently she has started mentoring young CA professionals to excel in their career. With this brief introduction, now I kindly request Ankita ji to take the charge of the session. I kindly request CA Pratik Chandwani to kindly hand over a memento as a token of appreciation. Now I request CA Sikandar Yadav to kindly hand over the CA benevolent contribution receipt of rupees 500. I kindly request Ankita ji to kindly take the charge of the session.
Hello. So, warm welcome to everyone. Good evening. With the blessings of Ma Saraswati, I would like to begin today's session. Thank you so much, WIRC Chairman Ketan Sayya sir, to recommend my name as a speaker for today's session over here. and I would also like to thank all the senior members on the dais here, as well as all of you who are very senior to me, I can see here. And thank you so much for being present here. And I would also like to thank my team members at the office and my family. Uh, so, uh, with this brief thank you, I would like to begin. And having said that, I am not an expert on the topic of international taxation, but I would like to briefly touch upon various aspects and make you understand it in a simplest manner possible. Uh, so topic of international taxation is very dynamic, and we have to look at the aspects globally from different angles. If you have any questions, we can take it up after the session. You can write to me if you have any queries on my email, or you can connect with me on the LinkedIn. So basically there is a question of country of residence and country of source. So this debate is always there. Developing nations wants to make sure that since they are providing a market to the uh, to customer base to the developed countries big companies, so developing countries wants to make sure that they get some fair share of taxation because they are a market base. And developed nations on the other hand, they feel that since the company which is doing the business globally is residing in their country, they want to make sure that their resident company gets taxed in their source country, sorry, country of residence. So this debate is going on, and so I will try to explain you the nuances of the topic on international taxation. And as the theme of this 3-day series at Borivali Study Circle is on new Income Tax Act, so what we have done is we have summarized the old sections vis-a-vis new section, which I have covered in this presentation at the last 3 slides of this PPT. And all the relevant sections in the presentation has been kept at the old act itself in order to just avoid some confusion at this stage. So coming to the new Income Tax Act 2025, there are some basic things which I think you all must be knowing, that the act is not doing any major changes to the rules, law or regulations. It is just trying to simplify and arrange the sections in a more systematic manner. So earlier there were 819 sections, which are now reduced to 536 sections. And the new Income Tax Act will come into force from April 1, 2026. So in the current financial year, when we are filing the tax return for AY 26-27, we still have to look at the old Income Tax Act. And one major change which has come up is the concept of previous year and assessment year will now be done away with, and all the years will be referred to as a tax year. So from 26-27 there will be only one year which is a tax year, and same April to March will be followed. And most important section related to TDS is now covered under the new act under section 393. And same rules of old regime, new regime will be covered in the new act also. And definition of virtual digital asset has been widened now to include the cryptocurrencies as well as other digital assets. So section 4 of the Income Tax Act is the foundational charge of income tax section. It establishes the fundamental principle that income tax is levied on the person's total income for a specific year. So we first look at section 4, then we go on to section 5, section 6 to determine the residential status of the assessee. Then we go to section 5, based on residential status, what income will be chargeable to tax. And then we look at section 9 and 9A to determine whether the income accrues, receives or deemed to accrue or arise in India. And then we will look at section 90, which is relief from double taxation. We will also look at 91 and 92 as well in the later slides. One important aspect why the topic is that, see, if we impose the, if we take the benefit of section 90 as per the DTAA, then certain provisions as per the section 4, 5, 6, 9 may not be valid. If we look at the beneficial provision of the DTAA, so certain points we have to like forget what is mentioned in the section and take a look at what is mentioned in the DTAA. So section 90 will interact with section 4, 5, 6, 9 by allowing the provisions of double taxation avoidance agreement, and it will override the standard charging and residency rule of the Income Tax Act wherever the DTAA is more beneficial to the taxpayer. Now we all know the concept of residential status of an individual. So just briefly, section 6.1 describes that if a person is resident staying in India for more than 182 days in a financial year, and or if they are staying in India for 60 days or more in the previous year and 365 days or more in 4 years prior to the relevant previous year, if this basic condition is fulfilled, then they will be called as a resident of India. There are certain additional conditions. If a person is resident for a 2 previous year or more in last 10 previous year, and if their stay in India is for 730 days or more in the last 7 previous year, so if someone is completing these additional conditions as per section 6.6, then they will still be considered as a resident. And the day on which the person is arriving in India and the day on which he is departing from India, both these days we have to count as the days of stay in India. And we always have to look at the residency in each financial year. It's not that if a person is a non-resident in 1 year, we have to deem him as a non-resident in the second year. For each financial year, we have to look at the residency conditions and where the person is falling. So these are some of the exceptions where in the following cases only basic condition number 1 is applicable. So we don't have to look at the basic additional condition as per 6.6. In case if a person is going for a employment outside India, if they are going as a crew member of an Indian ship, or if they are going as a PIO, if they are a PIO engaged outside India in an employment or a business or profession and visiting India during previous year, and their total Indian source income is up to 15 lakh. So this 15 lakh provision we will cover in the section 6.1a, which is deemed resident. So if you consider the Dubai people who are not charged to tax on their income in Dubai, so this section 6.1a says that if a person is earning more than 15 lakh rupees from their Indian source income, which can be rent or dividend or any other capital gains, then if that such person is getting a more than 15 lakh he's earning in India, then we have to consider them as a RNOR if he is not charged to tax in any other country. But for RNOR, one important relief which was come in the Finance Act, that their only Indian source income will be charged to tax and their foreign source income will not be charged to tax in India. So this table is summarizing entire residential status and all the conditions. Now coming to the company, so if a company which is registered in India, they will be considered as a resident of India, or a global company or any foreign company which has a place of effective management in India, so they will always be considered as a resident in India. And place of effective management is a place where key management and commercial decisions are taken. So we are not talking about the uh, day-to-day decisions or workings of the employees. We are here referring to the key management decisions. And poem also, like how we have to determine residential status every year, poem also we have to determine on a year-on-year basis, that where the poem of company is getting established. And one important notification is that if a foreign India has suppose formed a company subsidiary overseas, and if that subsidiary is having say all the managerial decisions being taken from India, then we have to look at the turnover of that company to determine poem. So if that company is say having a turnover of 45 crore in a financial year, then we can safely say that poem rules will not apply to that company. But once the turnover breaches a threshold of 50 crore Indian rupees, only then we have to look at the poem applicability on that company. And when assessing officer has a say a slight doubt that while doing the assessment of a company, if he thinks that there is a subsidiary and he wants to refer it as a having a residency in India due to the poem condition, so they will form a 3-member committee which is formed with Principal Commissioner of Income Tax and Commissioner of Income Tax. They will have a discussion about the company, and then they will also give the chance of being heard to the assessee. And once that all is done, then the poem of that company will set to be in India. So there are two important things. One is a passive income and one is a active income. So what type of income is called as a passive income? When a when a company is dealing with their own group companies, be it a subsidiary or any other associated enterprises, and all their business transactions are done only with the associated enterprises, or if the income of that company is arising from dividend for FTS, royalty, or interest income. So if any such company is there, then the company will be said to be being a passive company, and their income will be classified as a passive income. So if we have to classify a company as doing a active business activity, then more than 50% of their activities should be from a sources other than the passive income sources. So all these things are discussed in the slides here. So when a poem is established in India, then all the regulations of Income Tax Act, Companies Act, like filing of TDS return, everything will become applicable to that company. And to deal with such a situation, section 115JH is inserted in the Income Tax Act, which provides that following provisions of the Income Tax Act will apply with certain exceptions, such as computation of total income, treatment of unabsorbed depreciation, set off or carry forward of losses, collection and recovery of taxes, special provisions relating to avoidance of tax. So I'm not going into a lot of detail of this section right now. Now we come to the section 5, which is scope of total income. So scope of total income will be determined. First we have to look at the residential status. Then we have to look at place where the accrual or receipt of income is getting affected. And then we have to look at the point of time of accrual or receipt of income. And suppose if a non-resident has earned some income, say from his salary from a UK company, he's residing in UK, and if he gets that money from UK to India in the next financial year, or even if we can say in the same financial year, so because he has paid taxes on his income in UK, so we cannot charge tax on his income when he brings that income to India, because that income is already taxed outside India. And the tax treatment cannot be done on the basis of remittance. It has to be done on the basis of receipt or accrual of income in India. And income can be in cash or kind. So it need not be necessary that if you are earning only cash, then it is taxable. So this table is summarizing the summary of section 5, wherein resident and ordinarily resident, which is you can say as a resident, then second category is RNOR, and third category is a non-resident. So the most important difference between RNOR and NR in terms of taxability is that if a RNOR is doing some business activity which are being operated from India, and their customers are maybe paying them in Dubai or UK or wherever, but mainly the operations are being controlled from India. So in case of RNOR, if it is proved that such business income is getting generated, then that income in case of RNOR will be charged to tax in India. But if that same person was earning income from same sources, and if he was a non-resident, then such income will not be charged to tax in India in case that assessee is a non-resident. So this is a key difference between chargeability for RNOR and non-resident. Section 9 is a deemed income. It says that when any income is accruing or arising outside India through or from business connection in India, property, asset or source of income in India, or transfer of capital assets situated in India. So section 911 deals with this, and all these income will be considered as a deemed income in India. And section 912 deals with salary income, 913 deals with salary paid by the government of India, 914 deals with the dividend, 915 deals with the interest, 916 covers royalty payment, 917 covers fees for technical services, 918 covers gifts. Now we'll come at the basics of international tax, wherein residence-based tax. So residence-based tax is followed typically for a resident of a particular country. Their worldwide income is taxed in the residence country. And source-based tax is typically followed for a non-resident assessee, and their income which is arising from which has a source in a particular country, so that country will charge the income to tax on the basis of source principle. Business connection is again a very wide topic. So business connection and permanent establishment, these are questions of debate, and we have seen many case laws. So if the assessing officer is able to prove that activity of a certain company is having a business connection in India, and that company has a permanent establishment in India, so then in that case that company will become a resident of India, and that company will have to pay taxes on its income from India. And we have to look at the facts of each case. We cannot just refer one case law and decide that if facts of our case are very similar to that, then the same decision will apply. But we have to look at all the case laws like all the facts of the case very minutely to decide based on the facts of each case where there is a business connection and PE. And to establish a business connection, there has to be a continuous nexus. A one-time activity, or say someone has done some activity for a period of say 1 month in India, and then they went back to their country. So such short duration things are generally not charged to tax in India, and there has to be a continuous nexus of business activity from India in order to decide the business connection and PE. There is important concept of significant economic presence. So if a non-resident has a significant economic presence in India, then we can say that that income will be charged to tax in India. And income tax department through Finance Act has, government has come up with a Finance Act 2020 and given a monetary threshold, because it is very difficult to quantify how much would be the significant economic presence. So the CP rule says that when a non-resident receives aggregate payment within a year through transactions in respect of goods or services or property, including provision of download of data or software in India, which is carried out by such non-resident with any person in India, and such payment exceeds INR 2 crore. So if a person is earning income exceeding INR 2 crore, then they will be deemed to having significant economic presence in India. And second category, they have covered the influencers, content creators. If they are reaching audience of more than 3 lakh people in India from their foreign country, then such people will also be classified as having a significant economic presence in India. Now we can come to the section 90 and 91, which is dealing with the double taxation. So section 90 is with the countries with which India has DTAA, and section 91 is followed where India does not have any DTAA with that particular country. And it is important to note that DTAA benefits can be claimed only by resident of one of the contracting states of DTAA. If a person is from Dubai and if he wants to take benefit out of some Indian income and follow the India-UK DTAA, then they are not eligible. They have to be residing in either of the contracting states. And as per section 92, provisions of the DTAA or Income Tax Act, whichever are more beneficial to the assessee, they can follow that rule in their income tax return. However, it is very important to note that the provisions of treaty cannot be thrust upon a assessee. If they don't want to take benefit of the DTAA, then it is up to them to decide. And there are cases where at the time of assessment they have taken benefit of DTAA, but at the time of appeal stage they themselves decided to not go by the DTAA provision and they have taken a different stand. So it is totally up to the assessee to decide when they want to take the benefit or not. And if the Income Tax Act says that certain income is not chargeable to tax, and if DTAA is say giving a tax rate on say dividend of 10%, and if as per IT Act the dividend was exempt, then assessing officer, there are some cases where assessing officer is trying to impose the taxes on such income. But if the act itself is not charging any income, then we have to clearly look at the act and not go for the DTAA. And unless there is a double taxation, DTAA cannot be invoked. So if there are various types of double taxation, one is a juridical double taxation, one is a economic double taxation. So if there is a double taxation, only then we have to look at the DTAA. So role of tax treaties is to safeguard the double assessee from the double taxation, and they are like allowing the countries to prevent the tax evasion. And there are various methods to claim the benefit of FTC. Uh, so before that, let me cover some of the uh, basic features of a tax treaty. So tax residency is a concept, as I explained, that DTAA can be claimed by a tax resident of one of the contracting states. There is a exchange of information between, say, government of India and UK, which I have recently seen, because there are some changes to the UK non-dom regulations. So Indian government and UK government are exchanging the data of HNI, high net worth individuals, on people who have migrated from India to UK, or vice versa. So exchange of information between even India and UAE government on who are buying properties in UAE. So all these type of exchange of information are happening, and this also is a very important and important factor to determine the taxability. Most favored nation clause, it's a concept that suppose India has signed a DTAA with Netherlands, and there is a tax of say 10%, and then later on dividend, and then later on India signs another DTAA with France, which is also part of Europe, and there is a tax on dividend of 5%. So because India is giving benefit to the new country for 5%, then Netherlands is also should also get a fair chance, and that income should also be charged to tax at 5%. And government of India has clarified that yes, they will be adopting to this most favored nation clause, but whenever there is such amendment, it has to be notified by the government, and suo moto suo moto, it cannot be assumed that such MFN thing will become applicable. Also, make available is a interesting subject. So when suppose a company from USA is providing certain technical services to a Indian company, and that technical know-how and things, there are two ways of providing. So one is in such a way that in future Indian company will be able to make use of those technical know-hows by itself, and use those services. And there is a second way where we have to Indian company has to rely on the US company again and again to make use of that technical know-how. So if there is a make available clause, if there is such make available in that services, only then that income will be charged to tax. And if make available is not present in the services, then that income will not be charged, and payment will go from India without any deduction of TDS. Beneficial ownership is very important, and we know that to avoid heavy layering of the companies, income tax, FEMA as well as Companies Act has come up with a restriction of only 2 layer of companies, so that it is easy to identify who is the ultimate beneficial owner. MAP is another concept wherein suppose DTAA, due to the DTAA, certain points are not getting clarified, and there are still some glitches in the applicability of rule. Then government will look at the mutual agreement procedure, and then decide the final provisions. So this is one simple illustration of how the income is taxed in both the countries. So here foreign companies rendering technical services to a Indian company from outside India, and Indian companies paying for this services to a foreign company, these fees will be taxable in India even where services are rendered from outside India in the jurisdiction of a foreign company. So India will have a withholding tax on this payment, and 20% is say withholding tax on this, and then the foreign jurisdiction would further subject the income to tax on a net basis at a foreign company level, and that company will have to pay tax, so their income is getting taxed twice. So this is a simple example of how transaction leads to double taxation. So this is a example of double non-taxation and double taxation. I am not covering this in detail right now because I have many other slides. So this is a concept of juridical double taxation where same company is getting taxed in USA as well as India. Then there is a economic double taxation where two different people are getting charged on the same income. Now we will look at the articles of tax treaty. So there are definition provisions which are article 3, 4 and 5. There are anti-avoidance provision which is article 9 and 26. Elimination of double taxation is covered in article 23 and 25, and scope provisions are covered in article 1, 2, 29 and 30. Miscellaneous provisions are covered in article 24, 27, 28, and substantive provisions with regards to various types of income are covered in article 6 to 22. So here various articles of the treaty are defined, and India is following the UN model of UN model of the treaty. Treaty, we have seen this word while reading the treaty, that income may be taxed. So may be taxed, there are different sentences. One is a may be taxed. Sometimes it is used may only be taxed, which is different from may be taxed. And notification 90 and 91 of 2008 clarifies when a treaty provides that any income of a resident of India may be taxed in other country, such income shall be included in his total income chargeable to tax in India. There is a concept of most favored nation which I have already explained. Principal purpose test under the MLI. So MLI is a multilateral instruments where various countries have come up with new rules for applicability of DTAA, and they have signed the MLI. So one of the important points which is covered under MLI is principal purpose test, that if someone is entering into a transaction just to take benefit of the treaty and abuse the provisions to get undue tax advantage, then we have to limit the benefit of treaty to such cases, and we have to look at the what is the principal purpose of the transaction, and treaty benefits may be denied in such cases. So example is India Mauritius DTAA. In the revised India Mauritius DTAA, new article 27B has been inserted. It provides that treaty benefits shall be denied where the main purpose of the arrangement or transaction is to obtain a tax benefit unless the arrangement is in line with the genuine object of the treaty. And conceptual role of PPT is it discourages treaty shopping and round tripping structures. Now we will come up to the concept of foreign tax credit. So a simple example that when an Indian company is say having a subsidiary in Ghana, and that Ghana subsidiary is earning a profit of say 100, they are paying taxes at the rate of 15% in Ghana. So their net income will be 85. They will distribute a dividend of 85 to the Indian company. So for Indian company, and on that 85 they will deduct a withholding tax. So suppose withholding tax is 10% in Ghana. So out of that 85, 8.5 will be deducted, and the remaining amount of 76.5 will be given to the Indian company. So for Indian company, the gross income is 85, on which they will be charged to tax as per the rate applicable to them in India, and they will be able to claim a credit of FTC, which is the withholding tax paid in Ghana. So some clients argue with us that why we are not getting the benefit of corporate tax which is paid in Ghana, but that is not a correct way to look at it, and we have to look at the income which is charged to tax twice. So because Ghana is a different entity altogether, then we have to charge that income to tax like as per the corporate income tax rate in Ghana. That will be a separate income, and when they are giving a dividend to the Indian company, we have to only look at that dividend income which is taxed double 2 times, and we have to take benefit of FTC out of such dividend withholding. And India is following the credit method. So there are two methods of claiming FTC. One is a exemption method, and second is a credit method. So under the exemption method, the only one of the two contracting states charges the income to tax, and the other one gives a pure exemption. So there is no need to pay tax in the second country. But in case of credit method, both are charging it to tax, but they are giving the credit of the taxes which is paid in the other country. And in FTC, there can be two scenarios. Suppose income which is charged to tax in USA at income of 100 is charged to tax in USA for a 40 rupees tax. So and same income is charged to tax in India for 30. So Indian person, when they will claim the FTC, they will be able to get a FTC credit of entire 30 rupees, because in USA they have paid 40, but the extra 10 which they have paid in USA, they will not get any refund of that amount. So this is a loss ultimately to the company. And if there is a say reverse situation where the same income is charged at 20 in USA and at 30 in India, so Indian company will be able to take credit of 20 from USA, and they have to pay the balance 10 in India. And if a person wants to take benefit of DTAA, they have to always get a tax residency certificate from their country of residence. So I will now, before explaining the TRC and Form 10F, let me just summarize the tiebreaker rule. As per the DTAA, there are some cases of chances of litigation wherein we are not able to identify that the person is a resident of which country. So we have to first look at where the permanent home of that assessee is situated. If from the permanent home we are not able to identify which country out of the two he is having his permanent home, then we look at where is the center of vital interest of that assessee. If even center of vital interest test is not getting determined, then we have to look at the third tiebreaker rule, which is a habitual abode test. So where the person is habitually residing in India or in that other country. If even this condition we are not able to identify, suppose if he is residing habitually in two countries, then we look at the nationality test. He is a national of India or say UAE, if we take an example. Even if this condition is we are not able to decide, then at last we look at the MAP, mutual agreement procedures. So all these are explained in detail here. Now we come to the concept of TRC. So tax residency certificate is provided by the tax authority. So in India we can apply it to the income tax office. In UK we can apply it with HMRC. In USA we can apply it with IRS. So like that there are different income tax authorities in each country, and every year we have to apply for a new TRC, and TRC should have certain mandatory details, and if those details are not present which are discussed in the Income Tax Act, then we have to also file a form 10F online. And this form 10F is also, we know that it has to be verified either by way of a EVC or a digital signature. So these two things, TRC and form 10F, will become very important when we are dealing with a case where Indian person is making certain payment to a non-resident, and we are taking the benefit of DTAA. So steps to follow the DTAA are explained in detail here. This table is summarizing certain taxes for a foreign company. So in terms of foreign company, I wanted to cover one important aspect. Say a company from Spain has come to India and formed a subsidiary in India. So when they form a subsidiary in India, the Indian subsidiary's income will be charged to tax at a 22 or 25%, like whichever is the rate applicable to a domestic company. And when that foreign company is forming a branch in India, the branch's income will be charged to tax at a 40%, which is now a 35% rate. So, so this is a key difference between the taxability. And one more important aspect, which we, if we look at it like this, just as a simple thing, so we will say that 35% is higher and why I should form a branch. But if that person is filing return in their home country, so they will be able to claim the benefit of FTC of the taxes which are levied for a branch. So ultimately they have to just pay the 35% and like pay no tax in their home country, assuming that the home country would be having hardly 15, 20 or 25% of tax. But if it was a subsidiary, then they will not get any credit of FTC, which is for the taxes which are paid by subsidiary in India. And important point to note is that surcharge and cess is not applicable to the DTAA rate, but to the rates which are mentioned in the Income Tax Act, we have to add the surcharge and cess. And always one basic principle in terms of international taxation is that royalty, dividend, fees for technical services and interest, all these payments are always paid from, whenever they are paid from India to a non-resident, they are always charged to tax in India. Now we will look at the transfer pricing as just a brief. So transfer pricing provisions are basically nothing but a way to make sure that there are no shifting of profits from a higher tax jurisdiction to a lower tax jurisdiction, and transactions between associated enterprise are done at a arm's length. So there are 6 methods to apply in terms of arm's length to determine the arm's length price. As per the rule 10C, we have to look at the most appropriate method. Then coming to the filings and documentation, so we have to make sure that a proper transfer pricing study report is made and on record, and we have to file form 3CEB, which is a transfer pricing audit report. whenever there are transactions, international transactions between associated enterprises. So these are the important terminologies. Now we will look at the safe harbor rules for transfer pricing in India. So this is basically a measure to avoid the litigation in future, wherein we can say that if there are certain transactions which are prescribed by the Income Tax Act, if a assessee is having only those transactions, they can file form 3CEFA and apply for a safe harbor to determine their transfer pricing based on safe harbor, and then they will not be subject to a litigation in future. So certain benefits of adopting safe harbor rule is certainty, reduced litigation, ease of compliance and cost efficiency. So which are these eligible transactions? As per Rule 10TB, safe harbor is applicable only to eligible assessees engaged in a specific low risk activities like software development or IT enabled services, contract R&D for software or generic pharmaceutical, intra-group loan or corporate guarantees, OEM sales in auto components, receipt of low value intra-group services. So if there are such transactions, then one can think about opting for safe harbor, and these safe harbor provisions are applicable for up to assessment year 26-27. Then later on government might come up with some new tenure or new rules, but as of now it is applicable only for assessment year up to 26-27. GAR, which is a general anti-avoidance rule. So if a transaction is say if a transaction done by a assessee is exceeding say taxability of avoiding taxes of more than 3 crore rupees, then tax department may impose GAR on such transaction, and if GAR is imposed, then they will not be able to claim benefit of any DTAA provisions. So all the treaty provisions will be overridden. BEPS, as we all know, so OECD has come up with certain BEPS guidelines, and it wants to just make sure that there is no base erosion and profit shifting between various nations. So I'm just now coming to the very last part of this presentation. So there are two things when I was researching about this tax equalization. So tax equalization levy is one part, and second one is tax equalization policy. So tax equalization levy is also known as a Google tax. So this levy is done by the government on IT companies which earn revenue from India, but they are not physically present in India, to ensure the level playing field and avoid tax evasion. Then a concept of tax equalization policy is there, which tax equalization policy is basically many big MNCs, they want to say shift their employee from India to say USA, or from US to say India, and the employee will always have a fear that if I am earning the same amount of income in India, I am getting taxed at a lower rate, and if I move to USA, then I might be charged to tax at a higher rate. So why would I move and pay higher tax? So to safeguard such employees, the companies are coming up with a tax equalization policy, wherein they say that your net take home amount will be same, and we will reimburse you for the additional tax burden which you are facing. So this reimbursed income is also charged to tax in that country, but the ultimate net take home amount will remain same. So in the case of, there was a case CIT versus Jaydev Raja, and he was a employee of a Coca-Cola company, and Mr. Raja received a salary of, net salary of 77 lakhs in hand in India, and he paid a total of 50 lakh as taxes, out of which the Coca-Cola company reimbursed him 35 lakhs as perquisites. So his total income chargeable to tax was 77 plus 35, which is 112 crores. So income tax department, what they said, that since you have paid 50 as a tax, your total income should be 77 plus 50. But this contention was wrong, because 15 crore he has paid out of his own pocket, and his company has reimbursed him only 35. So Bombay High Court has ruled in favor of the employee, that only actual amount of reimbursement should be added as a taxable perquisite. The last part of my today's presentation is taxation on NRI. There is a special chapter, chapter 12A for NRIs, which is dealing with provisions. It is basically covering that whenever a non-resident is earning some money out of his foreign currency amounts from India. So if suppose he is buying some shares, debentures, or investing in certain government securities out of his foreign currency account, then such income will be charged to tax at a special rate, and such special rate is given as a, on the income it is given as a 20% special rate, and on the long term capital gain from sale of such specified asset it is given as a 12.5% rate. So such special investment is investment income from foreign exchange asset, such as assets brought using convertible foreign exchange, shares of Indian company, debentures issued by a public Indian company, deposits with public Indian company, securities issued by central government. And there is a one more good provision here, that if an NRI is earning only this income, and if their payer of that income has deducted a tax at a proper rate, then they need not file any tax return in India. So they are even exempted if they only are having this particular income. And if they earn, suppose LTCG from the sale of such assets, then if they reinvest that amount in the same specified assets and they hold it for another minimum 3-year period, then the entire gains from such LTCG are exempt. So this is a very good provision. And 115H section says that when such NRI becomes a resident, they can continue to be taxed at a special rate on specified income by filing mandatory declaration to AO along with the ITR, and this benefit shall be continued until that qualifying asset is sold or transferred. So this same thing is explained in the slide, and this is the section of Income Tax Act vis-a-vis the section of Income Tax Act which we have covered here. So with this I complete my session, and thank you so much to such a lovely audience.
Yes.
Yes, sir. No change. I have seen many YouTube videos where people are just to get the more views and likes, they are like blabbering that, oh, new Income Tax Act 2025, this and this has happened. But actually there is no change and all the rules are same as the earlier.
So, to conclude and to answer your question in detail, while we have the heart and the mind ready in terms of the Income Tax Act 2025, the operational part in terms of the other parts of the body like hands and legs and other body parts in the form of rules and forms are yet to be loaded. And I personally feel that the government is running too slow because it is going to get added from 1st April 26, where you will have to start taking up 10F forms. Now 10F form is prescribed under the PAST Act. It will become invalid immediately. Even if you talk about as simple as how to make a payment, if I have to apply for a lower TDS example application, those forms people normally start from the end of February or first week of March, but it is not operational as yet. Most probably we are expecting some things to come up in the first February budget, and then maybe we will get more light to all this as to what will be the practical difficulties in implementation when we actually start to do all this. From a concept point of view, if you look at the entire scheme of the act, they have never mentioned that they're going to change much in the language per se. And if at all there is some basic changes that have been taken care in the entire 3-day series that we are having. Any further questions to any of the participants? So normally we are not allowed to claim FTC because that income is not charged to tax, because FTC is India follows the tax credit mechanism. Only if there is some tax payable, out of that you can get a credit. Yeah, there may be judgments, but until now, if you look at the scheme and the operation of the act, it is not allowable in my personal view. While we have to look at that ITAD judgment, I personally not come across that judgment that you are referring to. I don't think it would strictly fly away at the higher forums, because if you look at the operation in which India is working, especially, it goes as a direct tax credit. It doesn't follow the other method of giving away the entire income completely.
If you can share the exact facts offline, I will try and see the answer. Yes. So, Indian company is making payment to a foreign company. They are giving TRC, Form 10F, everything. So, payment is falling under FTS or royalty, or what type of payment is it? Okay, license purchase. I can, yeah. No, it should. So generally, as per the rule, payments via credit card should be avoided, because if later on, if the department comes to know that 15 CACB was not issued and the payment has gone directly. Hmm. Yeah.
Practically, what we do is we get the Form 15 CB issued separately.
Yeah.
That is
Later on.
normally submitted to the bank only. So credit card payment may be made online, but you still have to collect the documents if you want to claim the TT exemption in terms of Form 10F. So if you go and speak to the large software providers outside India, which are like common software providers, either they will do the billing from an Indian entity if you speak to them, or even if you go to their website, or they will provide you the documents. There are certain companies which have already uploaded the documents on their website. So you can take those documents from them and interact with them. Nonetheless, if the payments are done, you can connect with them offline, maybe writing an email to their help desk and get those documents, so that your things are in place and
Yeah.
your payment is covered.
At the time of assessment, you should not face any difficulties. Yes, I think.
So software was covered under royalty, whereas there is a judgment, I don't recollect the name of that judgment, where they said if it is shrink wrap software, like you're not able to use or prepare that software for it, then tax is not applicable on that. So it's a pure distributor agreement. Yeah. So if it is a customized software and they are providing other services along with it, so we'll have to read all the facts in your case and then maybe come to a conclusion. But suppose if you're buying a straight software which you can use it for a license, then strictly if TRC and 10F all other things are available, then tax is not applicable. Different views are taken, but I am personally of the view that no tax is applicable. Because you are analyzing the data on your own, you are not using the benefit of it. That's it. So in my view, it is not taxable. We also have to look at the country, we have to look at the documents available, but personally, most of the cases, your case will go out of the taxation.
Can we have your last slide, please, ma'am? We just want to have your email ID.
Yeah, yeah. Can you show the last slide? Yeah.
We can take this.
Hello.
Suppose non-resident Indian is having 3.5 lakh income comprised of normal taxable income, let's say FD interest or property rent, and he has, let's say, 75,000 or 1.5 lakh dividend income, which is a special rate income. So in this particular case, still he has to offer it for a special rate of 20, whereas his slab rate is not crossing 20.
Yes. If he is opting for that special rate.
No, that option is available or it is mandatory for him. That is the question.
No, option, it is optional, not mandatory.
So he can still offer as a other income in normal,
Yes,
and he can go for a slabs.
Yes.
Okay. So till that threshold is not crossing 20, he
Correct.
can offer
Yeah,
for
yeah.
slab.
Yeah,
And once
yeah.
it goes beyond 20, then he can
Yes.
take a special rate.
Yes.
Okay,
They have
thank-
to select that option while filing ITR.
Okay, let me check which option.
Thank you very much for the wonderful session, Sri Ankita. I would request Sikandar Yadav to propose a very well-deserved vote of thanks to the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Pradeep Bhai. It is a great privilege and honor to propose well-deserved vote of thanks to today's speaker, CA Ankita Sethia. She has covered section 4, 5, 6, 9 and its impact on 90, DTAA special rate for non-resident. She has covered the topic in detailed manner, also explained various scenarios related to the subject. The presentation included tables, comparisons for benefit of the members. Thank you, ma'am, for accepting our invitation and sharing knowledge on the subjects. Now I request present members for a loud applause. Thank you.
With this we end today's session, and tomorrow we again meet for the third part of the Income Tax Act 2025. Thank you.